I have a question for you, and I hope the question is very much in terms of what I also think. And that question is prevention better than cure when it comes to security? And I hope you are saying absolutely it is. And I think so too, right? I think it is much better to prevent incidents and intrusions or breaches, so that way we don't have to spend infinite amount of money, resources, capabilities to fight against that incident. So in this video, I'd love to cover 4 key preventative measures that we can implement into the organization to help us um, prevent security incidents. So the very first one that comes to my mind is our endpoints, right? And I hope that the organization has some sort of endpoint detection and response capabilities, or has an asset list of all your inventory in terms of what's out there and your mobile devices, and hopefully an asset list that details very specifically the versions, your operating systems, going back to vulnerability management if you're currently facilitating that. So when we talk about endpoints, there's a endpoint detection and response vendors out there. You can go away and you can come up with, you know, pros and cons, and you can define, which ADR platform is suitable to your environment based on, your business direction, based on the technologies, based on your critical infrastructure, and the likes of the business environment. And hopefully all these ADRs have anti fill in the blank, anti-malware, antivirus, anti-spam, all the works of that. So typically, this will get spread across our environment to obviously, define and help us on our endpoint workstations, essentially. So endpoint detection response, again, is another area that we can implement to help us prevent security incidents. So the other area that I want to touch on is immutable systems. And if you haven't heard of an immutable system, typically an immutable system doesn't change. And typically it could be a thing like a static web page that doesn't really change. The back end also doesn't really change as much. Um, and typically what happens here is it's pretty much easy for us to detect any changes in the environment if we have immutable systems. So let's say, for example, we've got a system and then we need to copy this system to maybe a new environment or a new service provider. Maybe we're taking this across. So typically what would happen is if we take a copy of this operating system, or if we take a copy of the infrastructure itself, and then we go away and we make changes to that copy, in the new environment. And then let's say this copy here is 1, 2, 3, just to keep things simple. And then we go away, we make changes to that system, and this is the changed environment over here. And this is now X9Y. There's obviously a change to that. So the question kind of comes here, is to say, well, it's easy for us to then detect any sort of changes in that system. So if we've got a system that never changes, and then there's obviously a change that's happened, that's gone away, that's happened, um, it's easy for us to spot those changes across immutable systems. So typically, for us, well, the next question I'm sort of, as I'm thinking and saying this, is, well, what type of systems are these? And I guess it's typically user interactive systems. So typically where we have a front end that never really changes, but maybe again the back end could change, and vice versa. We kind of mentioned that here in step 2. And the benefits of that really is when, if things do change, we can obviously identify any changes of that, and it makes it very easy for us to define what they are. Next part, on step number 3 here, as we go through our preventive measures, is what I call hardening, and what everyone would call hardening. And this is definitely hardening across our infrastructure, our devices, our systems, our networks, and making them more secure than they've been done, right? So maybe we've taken something out of the box, we've plugged it in. It's obviously not going to be as secure as we go away and harden that device to the appetite of our environment. So what we want to do is, when we're talking about hardening, we want to define a baseline. And what this baseline allows us to do is baseline our configurations across the environment. So should our environment be Windows? Should it be Linux? Should it be Mac? We can go away and we can create a bunch of rule sets that says, well, if there's a disabled account, and someone's trying to enable that, well, here's what the process is going to be. And you create these sort of templates essentially that allow us to do that. And then, you can go away and you can specify a bunch of different templates. And there's obviously tool sets that will go away. And then, there's a specific tool set. I can't think of it right now, but there's a specific tool set that as you go away and you develop these templates, you can then scan your devices to make sure that it's complying with the actual templates, right? So, disabling user accounts and creating new ones could be a template. Maybe we've got things like changing default creds, right? If there's a default admin root guest account, well, then we need to change those credentials. So disable the account and create new one. So, new accounts, again, going back to the out of the box sort of situation. So if we've got that template, it will tell us, well, there's a default account on here, there's a root account, we need to go away and change those. Disabling unnecessary services. So I'm going to say number 2 here would be unnecessary services. So if we've got services that are not used in the environment or on a specific switch, on a specific router, on a specific port or of a host, get rid of it or turn that service off if you're not using it, right? So we want to make sure that the services, if you're not using them, get rid of them. If you don't need them, get rid of them, right? Number 3, NTP. NTP has been around for a really long time, as you all probably are aware of. NTP allows for devices to use the same time, the clocks, and making sure that synchronized logging is enabled across the environment. So it's all using the same time. As we compare them correctly, obviously to the offset of the different times. So if we're in Sydney time, we want to make sure that NTP is set up through all the devices. We're not getting a time out of London, for example, which would be quite annoying to then do a conversion to Sydney time before the logging infrastructure is coming up as London timing. So configure NTP, make sure your timing is all correct, the clocks are synchronized correctly as well. I would also then add to number 3 with clocking, I would say advanced logging. Now with some sort of platforms that we have, typically systems defaults are used for minimal logging purposes. So we'll need to obviously go in there and enable more features and functions to help us. So if you are using certain platforms or certain services within those platforms, be aware to maybe speak to your account managers or your technical departments. If you're using third-party services, of course, for those logging functions, if you've got a SIEM platform with a very well-known vendor, obviously you're going to be utilizing professional services to get making sure that you're getting the most out of your SIEM platform. In this specific example, do go away and speak to your account managers, speak to the technical team with those vendors, and make sure that advanced features and functions are enabled. You haven't got an appliance there that's just, you may be paying for a certain service that you haven't been aware of and things like that. So audit your infrastructure, make sure your advanced, I'm going to say advanced logging has been featured and functional and it's working and you're paying for what you're utilizing. And the final point here, as we go down this sort of way, number 5 is to install updates and obviously security products, the endpoint protections, and make sure it's going through your proper, I'm going to say, just ripple that out, your vuln management. Right, making sure that things are enabled and you're doing proper, obviously, patch management part of your process as well. As we continue on to number 4 here, I've got our sandbox environment. So sandboxing, we've kind of mentioned already what this is before. So obviously having that safe environment where we can go deploy, launch applications and see what happens, right? So we're typically stuck within that operating system or that network. It's all safe and it's free and, we can launch what we want, right? So we want to determine the whole thing about a sandbox is determine, is this malicious? I'm just going to say mal for short, right? That's the whole point of that sandbox environment. So a sandbox detonation is used when maybe we've got an application that's been flagged. I'm going to say flagged. Or maybe we've got some, questionable, I'm going to say questionable information. And I'm talking about information, maybe we've got a URL from a user, maybe we've got a PDF, maybe we've got some sort of, file, could be another Excel document, right? And then we don't know the nature of these documents. So we can take that information into a sandbox environment and what we call a sandbox detonation. There's different vendors out there that have got their own separate sandbox environments that you can typically deploy these things. They've got URL filtering where they can take away the PDF, analyze it, and then send it on once it's determined not malicious. So when we run it in the sandbox, basically see what potential changes it makes and helps us understand that potential threat or that issue within that specific application, or with that specific URL function or that PDF, and we determine the maliciousness of that file. So typically with the sandbox detonation, we kind of see what kind of happens, right? If there's screenshots, it'll show us what's going on, and then obviously a report. So the first part is with that sandbox, it kind of shows us, the activity. So it shows us what it actually does by, I'm going to say screenshots, and then obviously then provides a report of what it was going away to do. And then we can take that and obviously make judgment calls based on, and then final reviews on, is this safe or not? So is this safe, XYZ, or not safe, XYZ? And then you can go down your rabbit hole based on what you need to do. So where do we get sandboxes? Well, there's a couple. So I've got two here that I've used in the past that I've kind of loved. And the first one I'm going to say is Cuckoo. Cuckoo is an open source project. It's a platform you can go away, you can install it in your own, if you've got a testbed environment, you can go away, you can play with it. It's open source, really amazing tool set. And then another one is Hybrid Attack Analysis. And this is a website. You can go to hybridanalysis.com. It's an online platform, and then you can upload the files that you want to detonate, and then it will provide you the information back to to tell you if it's malicious or if it's not malicious, and so on. So there's a boatload of others. Cuckoo, in my opinion, has probably been the best one so far that I kind of really enjoyed the most. Hybrid Analysis, again, is a third-party website, so you may want to be just cautious of if you don't want to send information out to third parties. But should you want to go test it, to deploy it and see how it kind of functions and the likes of that, feel free to do that. So in this video, we've covered 4 key areas to help in terms of our preventive measures. I hope you've enjoyed this video. As always, please let me know if there's any comments or anything that you'd love to see further. And as always, I'll catch you all in the next video. Bye for now.